Well, the Russian government says it will have no choice but to retaliate if the United States continues with plans to station heavy weapons in Eastern Europe. Washington is planning to station tanks and other military equipment on the territory of some of its allies, like Poland. Bordering Russia, it has also been conducting massive drills with NATO allies in Eastern Europe. Russian officials say the US plans are America's most aggressive steps in Eastern Europe since the Cold War. Joseph Siracusa is Deputy Dean of Global Studies at RMIT, and he joins us in the studio tonight. Great to have you with us, Joe, as always. We see tonight the Russian Deputy Defence Minister saying this is almost forcing Russia into a new arms race. Is that too provocative?
No, actually, we've entered a new Cold War. It's stopped a lot of other things from happening, and if we're not careful, we're going to stumble into a war. Those weapons are being sent to Poland and to the Baltic states as a signal to those countries that we have their back. And of course, it's also a signal that things aren't working very well in NATO. There are 28 nations in NATO, and half of them don't give a damn about Poland or the Baltic states, and they don't want to go to war over the separatist movement in eastern Ukraine. So, in a way, this is a very dangerous and provocative kind of thing. I mean, the Soviet Union lost half of its empire, half of its wealth, and half of its people in 1991. And so we're not asking a great power to restrain itself. We're asking people on the back foot. Now, we have 108 tactical nuclear weapons in Europe and in Eastern Europe, and that's the fail-safe. That's where America would get involved. So 160 tanks parked in Poland isn't going to make much difference. In fact, it makes a glorious target for the Soviets, or for the Russians. So I don't think it's a very good move, but as I say, it's a signal to the Poles that we have their back. And there are a lot of Poles in America, and a lot of Estonians and Latvians and Lithuanians.
So do you think it's playing more to the domestic market in America rather than really... I guess you get the sense that President Obama is really annoyed that Vladimir Putin continues to really just snub all efforts to try and get the Ukraine situation sorted out.
Well, to add a little context here, at the G7 talks, the president was trying to prioritize what was going on in the Ukraine. And the European leaders weren't too much interested in it. And this is trying to energize them and give them some backbone here. But Putin knows two things. That his policies are working at destabilizing the European Union and NATO. NATO's looking for a mission, so to speak, but, you know, the Europeans don't want to pay any money for NATO. They never have. And the other thing is that he knows that the United States has lost its credibility around the world. So he doesn't really care what Obama does because he doesn't believe any of his threats. Obama failed to deliver in Syria, and he failed to deliver in Iran, and so they reckon that he's kind of a no-hoper here, so they're counting on him doing nothing about it. So it's a public relations thing that may backfire on the United States and NATO ultimately.
Do you see Russia responding in a more forceful way, literally themselves regrouping and bringing more weaponry and more troops?
Oh, yeah, well, it's their neighborhood. They got plenty of stuff there, and they can move it there in a hurry. Pre-positioning material around the world is no big deal. I mean, it's not new.
It's what you do with it.
It's what you do with it. And by the time that Americans were able to get into these tanks in the event of a crisis, those tanks would be blown up anyway, so they're just a target. Russia,
too. Putin is also playing to a domestic market, isn't he?
Oh, he's got 80% favorability ratings in his country.
But problems because the sanctions on Ukraine are biting hard.
Well, they are, but he's not the hardest of the hardliners in Russia today. You know, in a way, he's a little more moderate than we imagine he is. Yeah, they are biting. On the other hand, he's made his move in the Crimean Peninsula. He's made his move in eastern Ukraine, and he's going to try to grab back as much of the Soviet Union as he can. And he knows that the West is not unified, or there's a disunity in the West, and he's playing on it. He's a very good poker player.
Yeah, and right now he's staring Obama down. The US say they'll think about it. They're not sure yet what they'll do. Germany, talk to Germany's role in all of this, because you get the feeling that Angela Merkel is not that happy with Vladimir Putin either.
Merkel's not happy, and actually they speak in German. Putin's a linguist to a certain extent, but she's made it very clear to the NATO people that she isn't interested in ramping up activities against Russia. She's looking for the more moderate approach. The French don't want to do anything. As I say, there are 28 nations in the European Union and in NATO, and only half of them want to do something about it. So I think the president got very agitated with the Europeans at the G7 because they don't want to do much about it. But it's true that Putin is playing to the domestic market, and he's had a number of maneuvers in war games, including talking about using tactical nuclear weapons. And while we have 108 tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, he has 3,000 on the shelf, and he could take out a brigade of 750 men just like that with no collateral damage.
So it's a dangerous game.
We are stumbling into something very serious here. We're so interested in what's going on in ISIS in the Middle East and the South China Sea that sometimes we forget that the main game is in Europe, where it always has been for the United States. So it's a breaking story that's not going to have an end for a long time. It may take 10 years to cool things down with those people. But relations are as low as possible, and we have entered a new Cold War. They don't like to say that. Ban Ki-moon said that at the NPT talks in New York. He says we have a new Cold War, which has prevented anything from happening in terms of reducing nuclear weapons. So we have got to that point. So Barack Obama's legacy is getting smaller and smaller as he gets ready to leave office.
Joe, always good to get your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Bev.
Joe Siracusa.